This is my folk Lovebirds motif, and so I'm using the Tropicals kit. You can use anything you've got at home, and I have picked on my strip that came in your Take and Paint the varieties of colors. They're basically straight out of the box, except for I mixed up this green here to be a little bit more toned down. And I've decided that I'm going to make a bluebird, and in this example I'm going to use pink over here. And so I'm going to go start with my birds and use a little bit of a two-tone with the feathers. So I want this to be a little bit more muted, so I'm going to take some of that pigment away and start dispersing some of the pigment with my brush and water. Might even actually pull some of that back. That's why it's good to start on your strip and kind of see how dark your paint is prior to applying it to the paper, and then you don't have to make so many corrections. So I'm just kind of moving that paint around that bird, and any mistakes you make, you can clear your brush. You can just tap that in and then stamp very carefully with a clean paper towel. Okay, and now I'm going to do a little pattern here, filling this in, and I'll let that dry and then I'll come back over it in a minute. And now I'll go and paint these feathers. You're welcome to take a pencil or pen and make little designs additionally to what you've got here, or put in a background if you'd like. And now I'm going to do this pink bird, and I want that to be very light, so I'm going to start as light as possible. I can always add more color in. So if you're celebrating an anniversary or Valentine and you want to create this, I have cards available that you could also frame because they're 5x7, or I have envelopes. You can slip these Take and Paints are 5x7. They can go into a frame and into envelopes for any occasion. I'll come in here and draw in this design on the wing. Like so, and grab these feathers here and paint those in using the tip of my brush, which is loaded with paint, and because it has more pigment than I want, I'm pulling some of this pigment here, getting it into my brush and putting it into this other tail feather here. And we don't have to have a lot of dimension in here because the style of these folk motifs is more flat. Okay, so I will now move to the, you can do top to bottom is the most preferable so you don't get your hand in your painting. And now I'm going to pick purple as my main color here in some of these flowers. So I'm going to come in here and actually go over everything except for this heart. And I do want it to be muted, so I've got a lot of pigment on there, and I'm just going to move that around. The reef in the Tropicals, which is the purple, is a very intense color, so you have to test that out a little bit so you don't end up with more pigment than you want. And I'm going back around those edges while it's still wet. Like so, and I'm going to let that dry before I put more details into it. And I'm going to do this and this in like a red. That's Patea. It's kind of like a pinky red. Okay, while that's drying, I'm going to work on the top here. I'm going to turn this around so that I don't get my hand into it. And I'm going to use this Patea for this heart up here, which is just basically like a cherry red. Almost really looks pink. Need some more water in my brush. Okay. And this little heart is pink in the middle or red. And I'll let the rest of that dry. So my design, I'm going to come in here and get these circles and each of these little. Now I wanted that to be a little more muted, so I'm going to take my paper towel that's clean on the one side and push down on that and just sort of pull some of that pigment up and move that around a little bit. And I'll get a few of these here. Alright, I'm going to clear my brush and get a little bit of yellow for these beaks. And you can leave these white with the wings, which is really pretty, or you can clear off your brush and just kind of lightly go over this design. The pigment will stay in place because it's dry, but it'll loosen a little bit just to kind of make that a very faint pink. Clean off my brush, do the same thing over here. Like so, and now I'm going to do the green of these leaves just the way I did everything else. And if you're going to do these lines, you want to practice doing lines on your little spare piece of paper to make sure that you've figured that out, so you don't end up with a fat line you don't like. I'm going to keep in mind I do want this to be very light. Put some more water in here. And I'm going to begin doing the left side so I can keep my hand free and clear. And I've got so much water there, I'm not going all the way to the outside of that leaf. And you can see my pigment is dissipating a little bit, so I'm adding a little bit in to sort of match the top. And I have some pastel palettes that are super fun, and I think that would do well for this. That way I'm not trying to worry so much about making it faded. Plus the colors are super fun in that Pastel Dreams palette. And now I'm going to get a little bit darker and just sort of lightly go along these little squiggly doily lines. And I'm going over that purple. This color fits for that. So if you were, let's say, using yellow, it would turn brown. So you want to make sure that if you're putting a layer in, that you test it over here first so you know what color that'll make when you have a dry layer underneath, and then you add another color that's not in the same family on top. Okay, and then I think I'm gonna save that. And if you made a mess and went over your heart, you can just do exactly what we did here and just add more pop of color there. And I had some green in here. Making sure that's dry first. I like that contrast. I'm going to clear my brush. And now I'm going to get some of that blue. Tap in his feathers and get hers.